You know, the very strange weather that we're having around the world in New York, these incredible cold spells that we have had. Who had ever heard of the vortex in New York, right, before that weird weather? The incredible heat that Australia has suffered, the floods in the UK, and you name it, it goes on and on and on and on. There's no country that has been exempted. These very strange extreme weather events are going to continue both in their frequency and in their severity. It's not that climate change is going to be here in the future. We are experiencing climate change.
This Arctic blast could see America reach its coldest temperatures in decades. Millions of people across a huge swathe of the country are being advised to hunker down while the so-called polar vortex does its worst. Minnesota could be hardest hit, with wind chills set to make it feel like an astonishing -50 Celsius. The polar plunge has struck unusually far south. In Oklahoma, the rotating pool of freezing air is producing rarely seen temperatures.
The inside of the New York to Washington, D.C. train iced up.
Try opening the window in Chicago and you'll get this. 35 below zero right in your living room. It's so cold, Lake Michigan looks more like a hot tub. The water outside Chicago warmer than the frigid air, and ice already forming along the banks.
Images of water turning to ice before it reaches the bottom. Parts of Niagara Falls have become frozen.
South as Texas and here in Elk City, Oklahoma, heavy snow is falling. This is unusual even for winter.
This weather combination that we're seeing right now with all of the snow and the cold is unlike anything that we've seen in decades. And I can't emphasize that enough. The cold really scares me. And as such, that we will have temperatures that are potentially deadly or certainly life-altering temperatures.
Hundreds of flights continue to be cancelled, leaving passengers stranded. While on the coast, not far away, seawater, which flooded some communities during the storms, has now frozen over, marooning people there too.
Severe, pervasive and irreversible, words used in a new UN report about the likely impact of global warming. Amid extreme weather worldwide, experts say the health, economic prospects and food and water sources of billions of people are at stake. It's everything from droughts to rising sea levels.
We're not in an era where climate change is some kind of a future hypothetical. We live in a world where impacts of climate change are widespread and consequential. We see impacts from the equators to the poles and from the coast to the mountains. There's no question that we live in a world that's already altered by climate change.
Powerful waves have continued to pound Europe's Atlantic coastline. 2 people are now feared dead in the French holiday resort of Biarritz after they were swept out to sea. The town's famous promenade was battered during the night, leaving many businesses to pick up the pieces on Tuesday morning. The surge wasn't isolated to France. A large stretch of Europe's Atlantic coastline was hit by high tides, including Portugal and the Spanish region of Galicia. At least 1 person is now known to have died in Spain, with 2 others still unaccounted for. In Portugal, this amateur footage showed one man's desperate attempt to save his car, just managing to escape in the nick of time. Elsewhere, near the capital Lisbon, the swell was so bad, huge pools of foam like this started washing up along the shore.
Time to go. An earthquake of around 7 magnitude has struck China's far western region of Xinjiang.
The earthquake that shook central New Zealand, including the capital, Wellington. The minute-long 6.3 magnitude rolling.
Thousands of residents woke with a bang this morning after a series of earthquakes rocked the state. Many have told of their fear and confusion as the shockwaves rumbled through the suburbs.
Tremors and shakes were felt right across Metro Adelaide.
We have very few this close to Adelaide that are of this magnitude, so it is more unusual.
South Carolina and Georgia got a bit of a shake last night. An earthquake with a preliminary magnitude of 4.1 shook homes and rattled residents' nerves.
It's the second largest earthquake to ever hit the state.
A 6.9 earthquake hitting off the coast of Eureka. Already 4 aftershocks.
Chile has ordered an evacuation of parts of its northern coast following an earthquake with a magnitude of 7.0, jolted an area 35 kilometers.
Whoa!
Oh,
Earthquake.
Big earthquake right now.
Big earthquake. That's
a really strong shaker right now.
Very big.
I still feel it. Are you still feeling it?
Yeah.
Steady
it's
shaking
still
there.
shaking.
My hands are shaking.
A 4.4 magnitude earthquake has shaken Los Angeles. This is the second quake to hit the state in a week. This is the strongest quake to hit the city since the last aftershocks of the 1994 Northbridge quake. The United States Geological Survey said there could be a 5% chance of another strong quake within the next 3 days. Local residents in Nova Scotia and New Brunswick woke up to a bit of a surprise when a giant fireball illuminated Canada's skies early on Tuesday morning. CCTV captured the incredible moment when a bright burst of light lit up the sky. The fireball, which is thought to be a meteorite, could also be seen from Nova Scotia, where eyewitnesses said they saw bright lights in the sky and heard a loud noise like thunder at around 5 a.m. local time.
Alpha 6412, what do you want?
Often.
There's like a mudslide and everything's gone. The houses are gone.
Are there any injuries?
Yes, there's people yelling for help.
A desperate call to the emergency services as a deadly tide of mud and rock crushed everything in its path. Houses were swept off their foundations, trees keeled over, and people were sucked into the sea of mud like quicksand.
24 people are confirmed dead and 170 others are still missing. It's believed a small earthquake may have triggered the tragedy.
It's like a war zone up there. People finding children, people finding babies.
And while the task of finding bodies is already so grim, some have had the even more unimaginable trauma of finding only partial remains.
The slide hit with such force that oftentimes the rescuers are not recovering full intact victims.
Massive turnout by the emergency services personnel going through their districts, checking. A lot of rolling going on down here. My family lives down here in Orange County. They said it was quite violent. It went on for quite a while, so a pretty good shaker coming through.
A 5.1 magnitude earthquake shook Los Angeles, triggering a rock slide.
This is actually the second noticeable earthquake that this area has had in just the past 2 weeks. And since the earthquake hit, there have been more than 100 aftershocks, including one that was 3.4 just a short time ago.
The ground shook just after 9 Friday night.
We might be experiencing, I should say, an earthquake here.
And seismologists are particularly worried about this quake because they think this fault may be reawakening. We haven't heard from this particular fault, they don't think, in several decades. The reason they really don't want to see this fault wake up again, it runs right through downtown LA.
Yeah, the second largest city in the country, Ryan.
This footage shows a rare tornado that ripped through Northern California, damaging dozens of homes, while debris smashed windows and ripped holes in walls, and left residents of the city of Roseville in shock over the unusual event.
0.8 magnitude quake hit the northern part of Yellowstone National Park in Wyoming. It shook the ground at about 5:30 this morning, California time. It was felt in towns along the Montana-Wyoming border, including West Yellowstone.
This morning,
Tsunami sirens blaring. Chaos as an 8.2 magnitude earthquake rocks the coast of Chile, driving almost 1 million people to evacuate their homes. Fires burning after a 6-foot tsunami followed the quake.
The shockwaves were felt hundreds of miles away, shaking buildings as far away as Bolivia and Peru.
People are dead and many more injured.
For the past 7 days, more than 1,700 earthquakes worldwide. We do still have tsunami advisories.
The earthquake even triggered microscopic seismic measurements in New York Central Park. There have already been more than 24 aftershocks. In just the past 2 weeks, hundreds of earthquakes have been shaking Chile's far northern coast.
Just about 24 hours ago, there has been another strong earthquake off northern Chile, and the emergency office there has ordered preventive evacuation of the coastline in the north of the country. There's a quake magnitude 7.4 offshore.
Latest official report on climate change that says it is underway and we are already suffering the effects. Here in Australia, air and ocean temperatures are increasing, with waters off our east coast amongst the fastest warming in the world, and deadly algal blooms, and rainfall is expected to decline across southern New South Wales and Victoria. We should have 5 seasons in Australia, adding a second spring, basically shortening autumn and winter by 2 months.
The dangers of climate change are set to get much worse.
Australia can expect more intense rain and drought, greater bushfire danger and worse cyclones.
Warming across every state, every territory and every season in Australia.
It's the superstorms bringing nations to their knees. The searing sun turning the earth into a tinderbox, leaving the ground cracked by drought, and the crashing waves of rising seas. But it seems this extreme weather isn't random. A UN report says this is climate change, and things are only going to get worse.
We have reasons to believe that if the extent of climate change continues to increase, then the very social stability of human systems could be at stake.
Today's report is somber reading. Rising temperatures and changing weather could mean more crops fail, so food is scarce. Wildlife will face extinction. Rising sea levels could make water undrinkable, with flooding forcing millions from their homes. And the threat of war will rise as people fight for resources.
US President Barack Obama has warned Russia that any military intervention in Ukraine would lead to unspecified costs. There are reports of Russian troop movements from and into Ukraine's Crimea region.
We are now deeply concerned by reports of military movements taken by the Russian Federation inside of Ukraine.
One of the world's most deadly infectious diseases is spreading across parts of West Africa.
The country is facing an unprecedented epidemic of Ebola.
An epidemic of an extent that's never been seen.
The President of Guinea has urged the people not to panic.
Its movement across Guinea makes it more serious than any previous epidemics.
The strain can kill up to 90% of its victims who suffer extensive internal and external bleeding. So far, 78 have died from the disease.
It can't be denied that there is real interest surrounding the existence of Nibiru. For hundreds of years, the search has been on to rediscover this hidden planet. But why are we searching for something that we have never seen, and how do we even know it exists? You may be surprised to learn that even though we have not discovered this planet in modern times, it is almost impossible for it not to exist, and we are going to tell you why. There is ancient and even modern evidence that can't be accounted for but anything else than the existence of another planet. Due to the large number of natural disasters that have happened on our planet, many people claim that it is due to the approach of Nibiru. Now, for those of you who see it as the destroyer of the Earth, we're not going to give you any false evidence that it is sitting behind the sun and approach is imminent. That is simply not the case. In fact, the planet is so far away at the moment that it may even orbit another sun in a figure-8 type orbit. This would explain a highly irregular orbit period and could even blow open the doors to once again rewrite what we have been led to believe about our position in the solar system. I mean, it could even be 20,000 years from now before it becomes visible through a high-powered space telescope. Does that not just blow your mind apart? Anyway guys, there are 6 credible pieces of evidence that could prove Nibiru exists. Now listen, We are not saying it definitely exists, but we are saying that there is something out there in the perimeter of our solar system that when discovered, it will not only confirm our wildest suspicion, but answer the questions of which we are already coming up with answers to. Just wait until you hear this. At number 6, irregularities in Neptune and Uranus' orbit. Following the discovery of the planet Neptune in 1846, there has been considerable speculation that another planet exists beyond its orbit, a region we call the Trans-Neptunian region. The search was underway in the mid-19th century and culminated at the start of the 20th with Percival Lowell's quest for Planet X. Lowell proposed the Planet X hypothesis to explain apparent discrepancies in the orbits of the giant planets, particularly Uranus and Neptune, speculating that the gravity of a large unseen ninth planet could have perturbed Uranus enough to account for the irregularities. Clyde Tombaugh's discovery of Pluto in 1930 appeared to validate Lowell's hypothesis, and Pluto was officially named the ninth planet. But in 1978, Pluto was conclusively determined to be too small for its gravity to affect the giant planets, resulting in a brief search for a 10th planet. The search was largely abandoned in the early 1990s. But in 2014, based on similarities of the orbits of a group of recently discovered extreme trans-Neptunian planets, astronomers hypothesized the existence of a super-Earth planet, 15 times the mass of the Earth and beyond 200 astronomical units, with the possibility of a high inclined orbit at some 1500 astronomical units. 1 astronomical unit being the distance between the Earth and the Sun. In 2016, further work showed that this unknown distant planet is likely on an inclined, highly eccentric orbit. There is clear evidence out there, but because the planet is so far away, constant observations are close to impossible. And at number 5, Sumerian text and depictions. How could a civilization dating back 5,000 years have had more advanced knowledge of astronomy than we have today? That is a question we have long lost the answers to, but the ancient Sumerians depicted and documented the first Nibiru some 3,500 years before the birth of Christ. There are even descriptions of beings that came down from this planet of the crossing to mine Earth for gold in order to save the atmosphere of Nibiru on its closest approach to the sun. These beings are known to the ancients as the Anunnaki, and they were worshipped on Earth as gods. Although the Sumerian astronomical texts are incredibly difficult to decipher, it has been done. One thing that is there for all to see and easily understood is of course the very famous depictions of Nibiru. This can't be denied, but incredibly we are yet to fully understand astronomy as the ancient Sumerians did all those thousands of years ago. Maybe we are overcomplicating our understanding of the sky, maybe we're looking too hard and too far that we are missing the obvious answers to the deepest questions. At number 4 on our list, Carlos Munoz Ferrada. His name is forever linked to Nibiru. Carlos Munoz Ferrada predicted with extraordinary accuracy numerous earthquakes in South America during the last century. He did this by making direct correlations between specific astronomical phenomena and various catastrophic earthquakes and volcanic eruptions. His most significant prediction regards the future arrival of a comet planet Nibiru. Ferrada calls it a comet planet because it has the size of the planet and the speed and elliptical orbit of a comet. He explains that this is due to the catastrophic approach of the comet planet, which will eventually pass 14 million kilometers away from Earth, accelerating the great geophysical change, which is already slowing and advancing. The Chilean astronomer specified the mass, velocity, orbital time, the trajectory, and the terrible consequences being produced by Nibiru on our solar system. He recognized Munoz Ferrada for his mathematical accuracy in regards to the earthquake that devastated the southernmost country in South America in 1939. The accuracy was to such an extent that Ferrada even set the date of the earthquake, which was published in the Journal of Conception. He was only wrong by a difference of 2 hours. The disaster claimed the lives of 60,000 people. He also announced the earthquakes of 1960 and 1985. There will come a time when Nibiru will be permanently visible as a second sun and in common conditions in broad daylight. This is why it was rediscovered in the 80s by the Orbiting Infrared Telescope, IRAS. Carlos did not mention when this planet would come close to the Earth, only that world events would intensify as the years go by. The closer the planet gets, the more cataclysmic the events. We still cannot see the planet, so as we said at the start of the video, we are looking at a time frame of over 20,000 years at least before the events get to any significant intensity. So don't worry guys. We may already have colonized the galaxy and invented light speed by that point. At number 3, cataclysms on Earth. At intervals throughout Earth's history, there has been world cataclysms or extinction level events. From giants to dinosaurs and even 20-foot insects, the Earth has been under occupation for millions of years. And just like all other species that have become extinct, we will also come to an end at some point in Earth's history. The most recent cataclysm that we know of came 12,000 years ago, but unfortunately have no idea why it happened. We showed you in our previous selection that the Sumerian astronomers depicted the planet Nibiru on its way out of its highly elliptical orbit. So this could actually be the cause of the ancient event of 12,000 years ago, and the Sumerians were still able to view this planet on its way back to the outer solar system. It would explain how the Sumerians had the advanced knowledge possibly gifted from the Anunnaki of Nibiru as they mined the Earth for gold. Now we're completely aware of how crazy and wild of an idea this sounds, but let's just keep it away. In at number 2, the asteroid belt. The asteroid belt is a strange place. Located between planets Mars and Jupiter, it is thought by many that the asteroid belt was in fact once a planet that collided with the Nibiru system. Beginning in 1801, tiny rock and metallic objects were discovered to be orbiting the Sun at about this distance. Since then, several 100,000 large asteroids have been catalogued, and it is estimated there are more than 1 million large asteroids. Among catastrophists, there is substantial disagreement on the matter of this missing 5th planet from the Sun, in the place of which lies the Great Band, the debris of an enormous planet which the Sumerians knew as Tiamat. Ancient Sumerian texts indicate that Tiamat was struck by a large planet, which moved into its present orbit, and also created the Earth's moon and the asteroid belt. In his books, The 12th Planet in the Cosmic Code, Zechariah Sitchin outlines the celestial battle, as described in the Babylonian text Enuma Elish. The planet Nibiru, as it came into the solar system on its clockwise retrograde elliptical course, struck Tiamat, which was moving in its ordained counterclockwise orbit. According to Sitchin's well-known translations, one of Nibiru's satellites struck Tiamat first, followed by 2 more of its moons. Nibiru then itself, an enormous cosmic entity, struck Tiamat, smashing 1/2 of the planet into pieces, which became what the Sumerians called the Great Band. The remaining half of the planet, which was struck by a smaller moon of Nibiru, was catapulted into a new orbit, along with a chunk of material which became its moon. According to the Enuma Elish, Tiamat's original moons were dispersed, many changing the direction of their orbits and rotations, creating Earth's moon and the asteroid belt. There is indeed evidence of this great cataclysm in our solar system today. And finally, number 1 on our list, Planet 9, speck of light observed. In January of 2016, researchers at Caltech stunned the world by announcing the discovery of the Planet 9. A speck of light was observed, and astronomers and stargazers around the world are waiting in anticipation for more confirmation. Though the NASA researchers are stressing that this is only a speck of light that has been observed, they can confirm that they are on the verge of discovering the planet. So basically, the 200-year search for Nibiru is going to happen within 20 years. The object, which the researchers have nicknamed Planet 9, could have a mass of about 10 times that of Earth and orbit about 20 times farther than the Sun on average than Neptune. It may take 20,000 Earth years to make one full orbit around the Sun. Have noticed some of the dwarf planets and other small icy objects tend to follow orbits that cluster together. By analyzing these orbits, the Caltech team predicted the possibility that a large, previously undiscovered planet may be hiding far beyond Pluto. They estimate the gravity of this potential planet may explain the unusual orbits of those Kuiper belt objects. So there you have it. What do you think of our selections here? We hope you have enjoyed the evidence we have chosen to present to you. We are fully aware of the false information surrounding this planet, and the people who post the lies are doing a serious discredit to the people who are actively and historically dedicating their lives in the search for the planet Nibiru.
Wise men said, just walk this way to the dawn of the night. Wind will blow into your face as the years pass you by.
We all call it Planet X or Nibiru, but it is a dwarf star. It's either a red dwarf or brown dwarf star. Now, the object, which is clearly Planet X by deductive logic and process elimination, is therefore now between Mars and Jupiter. It's not in the outer reaches of the solar system. It can clearly be seen, especially from the southern hemisphere.
The implications and the side effects of what might happen to us here on Earth is pretty scary. We're going to get into some of that. Now, one of the cool things that David discusses with us here is instead of having to just take his word for it, he gives you coordinates on where you can actually see it for yourself. Mid-2017, he says we're going to see an eclipse with Nibiru. He has been able to take his background and transition it into research on Planet X, and has recently compiled an awesome book with a treasure trove of information. David, how the heck are you?
Very good tonight, sir. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. I appreciate you coming on here with us. I know that you had reached out to us a few weeks ago. You've got a really cool book coming up here that's going to break everything down with Nibiru. You know, let's talk about what you do.
Well, the way I got into it, I've always believed in following the money. About 5 years ago, I got into some research on the Pentagon black budget. And I don't know if you recall, but you probably do, that the day before 9/11, Don Rumsfeld announced at a Pentagon news conference that the agency was 2.2 trillion short. Money was simply missing, 2.2, not billion, but trillion. So having worked for a period of time at the Pentagon, I realized this was most likely black budget funds. And I did some investigation, and I ran across a couple of areas, basically the deep underground military base research done by Jesse Ventura, done by Phil Schneider, done by other personalities. And I realized, of course, that's likely the source of the lost money. It's black budget ops, and it's being spent. And why is it being spent in terms of these type of bases? So that's how my curiosity was picked, you might say. These bases, I understand, are built away primarily from geologic tectonic areas, but again, when Planet X passes, you're going to have new geotectonic faults established when you have force 11, 12, 13, 14 earthquakes. So I don't know how safe they're going to be. It could be a lost investment for those people. In any case, that was my basic introduction about 5 years ago, and then I got into the science of the topic. My understanding, and this is partly from Phil Schneider, I know he worked 11 years at Groom Lake, Area 51. He says the black budget varies between 0.2 trillion and 1.2 trillion per year. I'm not sure when the inception started. It was absolutely going on in the late 70s and 80s. He says a couple of dozen of these may be reasonable for protection. I agree, nuclear protection. But the question is, why do we have over 130 of these? That doesn't really make any sense unless, obviously, Planet X is absolutely a fact, which it is.
Well, so, you know, 4 years ago, I remember reading an article on Yahoo News that claimed eventually people are going to be able to look up in the sky and they're going to see what looks like a second sun, but really it's a giant sun that exploded. I think they said it was Betelgeuse or something like that. So in my mind, when I read stuff like that in the news, I think it's, you know, the forces behind the scenes or whoever's kind of orchestrating the media prepping people, you know, subconsciously getting them ready for this type of event. First it's just an explosion that looks like a sun, and then, hey, oh, it is a sun. So, I mean, do you have any physical evidence, like pictures that you can say without a shadow of a doubt, or files or white papers?
Yes, I do. In fact, there's some very good videos on the internet itself that are good photographic analysis. There's one called Multiple Suns Rise Over Halifax, Nova Scotia. Those are the keywords that a person would enter on YouTube to read it or view it. And you can see the sun. And then at the 3 o'clock position, you have Planet X. To the right of Planet X, you have a separate lens flare. Now, that doesn't reflect the lens flare, of course, in the water below, but Planet X is generating its own light, and you can see its reflection, therefore, in the water below. Next, I think a fog bank moves in, and it obscures the sun, but Planet X is still visible. A lens flare cannot do this. Now, that's one good example of something they could simply look up themselves on YouTube. There's also some good Davis Station South Pole videos out there. And there's, in my book, which is Planet X, The Arrival in 2017 by David Mead on Amazon, I've done a video. It's page 15 or 16 or so of the book. And I have a section called Photographic Analysis of Planet X. And I study one video which another analyst did an extensive study on. And let me just sort of explain what happened. A fellow named Glenn Vaughn on April 11th, 2015, was flying down the Pacific side of Central America. He's a professor, an ex-professor at California University. He took a 20 megapixel raw file with a Sony digital camera, and he confirmed the report by sending it in to a particular analyst for or view. He took it through an aircraft window. Now, an analysis of the metadata indicated it was taken at 240 dpi, very high resolution, and the metadata further showed the date, the time, the GPS coordinates. I think it was a Sony DSC HX50V camera. In any case, using Starry Night Professional version, the video, which is referenced in my book and which is on YouTube, did a field of view analysis, and he determined Mercury is above, in other words, superior conjunction with the Sun, and the object in the field of view, therefore, is not Mercury. Mercury does not have wings, as does this object, and Mercury does not have the brightness or contrast of the unknown object. Now, the analyst also performed a gamma test on a paint program. Gamma testing shows if an object is hot or cold. Hot objects generate, of course, their own light like our Sun. A lens flare would be a cold object. They read direct light, they don't generate it. So he started with a gamma of 1, reducing it by steps. At point 10, the gamma illustrates stark differences. At point 01, he shows the hottest, brightest objects on the video. He then reduced brightness to a value, I think, of -3 in contrast to +2. The hot objects fade in together, proving they're genuine. Then he ran a luminance test to determine the intensity of the object, and he determined it was behind the Sun, not a reflection. There are actually wings on the object, which is clearly behind the Sun. Now, he stated this is deeply disturbing. The reason is that gas tails of comets follow solar winds, and they're not visible until the comet's orbit is inside of Jupiter, at which point, normally the luminosity at that point of the Sun makes the tails of the comet or the planet visible. Of course, Planet X, we all call it Planet X or Nibiru, but it is a dwarf star. It's either a red dwarf or a brown dwarf star. Now, the object, which is clearly Planet X by deductive logic and process elimination, is therefore now between Mars and Jupiter. It's not in the outer reaches of the solar system. It can clearly be seen, especially from the southern hemisphere. Now, as of April 2015, therefore, the date of that video and the analysis, Nibiru is close enough to the Sun so that the Sun's light is reflected to the tail, making it appearing like wings. And there's one other quick comment I'd make, because actually that video had two parts. The second part was a lady who lives near where I do, Sanibel Island, Florida, Melissa Huffman. Now, you can look at this video itself on YouTube. I think it has more or less gone viral, and nearly 1 million people have looked at it. And this is a 2015 video. The object is very interesting. She pans the sky and shows the object and then the moon. Now, it's clearly a planet visible just north of the Sun. You know, using stellarium and knowing the moon phases, comparing it to her video on the moon, you can go to the derived date, take away the atmosphere and the ocean, and you can determine the relationship of the stars to the horizon. So to determine the date, you basically just use moon charts, and the moon is well below the horizon in all dates after September 26, 2015. Therefore, the video was taken earlier. Now, September 2015 moon phases give us a comparable to the moon in the video. And if you look at the moon phases diagram to the actual picture of the moon, it has to have been photographed on September 23, 2015, based on moon phasing. Now, on that date, Mercury in stellarium is very dim, somewhat above the horizon. Also, I believe it's in a different location than the unknown object. All other planets are below the horizon. The video, therefore, conclusively and plainly shows an unidentified planet, or dwarf star, Planet X, of some significant magnitude quite clearly. So I can reach no other conclusion, and the analyst did himself, than this is a rare photo from this hemisphere of Planet X approaching us.
Wow. You know, and there's also speculation now, and I hadn't heard this until about a year ago, that not only is Planet X going to come our way, this dwarf star, but also a bunch of planets with it, like it's bringing in its own solar system. Is there evidence or truth to that?
Right. There's a number of videos there. I've seen some real good ones from the South Pole Telescope, and they indicate that there are a variety of moons around this. It's basically, as you say, it's its own solar system. A lot of people don't realize this, but binary, what we've got in our solar system here is obviously a binary twin. 76%, this is a fact, of all stars are binary twins. In fact, 16% are trinary twins. There are 3 suns, but ours has a binary companion, and it comes under the name of Planet X, Nibiru, and so forth, Nemesis. There are various names to it. But ours has a binary twin, and it's very common. It's extremely common, and it's basically what is approaching us. And apparently, from all descriptions, indications, reports, insider reports, photographs, and other sources of human and signal intelligence, it contains 5 to 7 moons around it. So it's a solar system approaching our solar system, which makes it extremely dangerous. The red dragon of Revelation 12 may well be, and I believe rather obviously is, Planet X, as is referred to in an earlier chapter of Revelation, I think Revelation chapter 8, in a similar manner. A colleague of mine at the university, one university in the western U.S., brought up a very interesting point, perhaps to cover up to my attention. Here it is. Basically, he said the areas of the dragon anomaly have been covered or patched up by Google Sky in the past. But one of the ways to actually see what is behind this patched out area is to use a program called Skyview by NASA. Skyview, what that is, it's a virtual observatory on the net. It generates images of any part of the sky from wavelengths of all regimes, radio to gamma. You just filter it. Now, when you view these images in various filters, you can see the actual color of this anomaly in Virgo is red, and it does look very menacing as it appears to have a face like a dragon with 2 profound eyes. It's very intriguing and quite strange. Now, just for your listeners, I'll provide very briefly the right ascension and declination if they want to go to Skyview. And here it is. Just cut and paste this coordinate. Here's the right ascension, 13 hours, 50 minutes, 44 seconds. Here's the declination, and that would be minus 8 hours, 13 minutes and 59.7 seconds. So right ascension is the celestial equivalent of longitude, and in the sky latitude is called declination. So you just enter those coordinates, and then on Skyview you just choose the Iris 100 micron telescope setting, and there you are. You've never seen an object quite like this one. Now, the sign itself might be a sweeping parenthetic of that entire biblical 70th week of Daniel, which is a key to solving the most complex cryptogram in existence, the book of the Apocalypse. As to what it is, the astronomical scientific community, I think, is keeping a very low profile. And the question is, why did they ever cover it up to begin with?
Well, and not only that, if we could get into some of the more scientific stuff as well.
Because it's so close now, it's different. When it was first observed, probably the first time it was actually observed, it was observed in the infrared spectrum in 1983 by a orbiting Earth satellite telescope called the Infrared Astronomical Satellite. And this is when all those articles appeared in the Washington Post and the New York Times and so forth. And that's when, right before blackout occurred, there were some articles over a 6 to 12 month period of time when it was pretty much spoken freely of, and then all of a sudden I think they realized the seriousness of the matter, and they went ahead and produced a blackout. Now remember this, the blue daytime sky is going to hide Planet X until it eclipses the sun, but there is going to be a full disk solar eclipse right after September 23rd, 2017. This occurs, if you look at moon charts, on October 5th, 2017. And what happens, of course, during a full disk solar eclipse is the sky turns black, and that will reveal at that point, that week, in my opinion, the week of October 5th to 12th, according, if the book of Revelation is true, because this ties in perfectly with it, that could well be the exact month that we can first see it with the naked eye. So, in my opinion, combined with a predictive computer-generated astronomical model, the Bible, the book of Revelation, the Apocalypse, tells us that the red dragon, or Planet X, or Nibiru, appears after September 23rd, 17, but it has to appear before October 11th, 2017. At that date, October 11th, 2017, the sign in Virgo, the woman Virgo, will no longer be, quote, pregnant. Then the red dragon, or Planet X, therefore must make it an appearance before October 11th. So that seems to be a cutoff date. Jupiter, which is known as the planet or the star of the Messiah, exits Virgo, the Virgin, on October 11th after having spent, I believe, 301 days or about 42 weeks in the, quote, womb region of that constellation. And again, after that point, the woman will no longer be pregnant. So that gives us a very narrow window, just to use Book of Revelation or the Apocalypse as sort of an intel briefing. And the great sign of the woman is described in Revelation 12, 1 to 2, forms and lasts for a few hours. And according again to astronomical models, this sign has never before occurred in human history. It will occur once on September 23rd, 27. It will never occur again. And I believe it places us right at the time frame from that analysis of the Planet X approach to the Earth. I would prepare on or before the fall of 2017. I would conduct emergency preparedness. Of course, you want to be spiritually ready. You want to have a clear conscience and all that, but you need to do physical preparations as well. I think survival gear, emergency food, that sort of thing. And the reason is that, again, all this while you're going to get increasing levels of disinformation from the mass media until it's actually there. And then they're going to say, whoops, we didn't have any notice, we don't know what happened, and so forth. And they're going to run and hide in what they've already established. But, you know, the public is there and the public has to fend for itself. This global warming, as you've heard, I'm sure, is a cover story. The Earth is heating up from the core outward because of the approach of Planet X. During the 20th century, I think there were 35 volcanic eruptions in a typical year. Now there are more than 35 of these every single day. So basically, when X approaches, that week you see it in the sky, let's say it's October of 2017, you know, for purposes of discussion, at that point, it's not going to actually collide, I don't believe, with the Earth. The Earth is only 8,000 miles in diameter. It may pass 5, 10, 15 million miles away, but it has a very high magnetic attraction. It's going to have a gravitronic effect. It's going to cause the shifting of the Earth's crust. It's going to cause major volcanic activity. It's going to cause tidal waves. And when a pole shift happens, the ocean literally comes up out of its basin. So you're going to have major weather changes, seismic activity, and volcanic eruptions. Probably at that point, Yellowstone, the Yellowstone super caldera, will likely erupt. That could affect up to a third of the United States, cover it with ash.
Well, let me jump in here for a second. I'm glad you brought that up because you can clearly tell a difference now with how hot the sun is. I mean, even if you look at the same temperature, you know, 75 degrees now versus 75 degrees 10 years ago, although it's the same temperature, the sun on your skin even, there's just more heat there.
If you go to the book of Revelation, the Revelation indicates that the sun is going to be hotter at that time frame. Now, the EMP effect, Planet X has a massive tail. It's fantastically charged. It's magnetic. The tail has moons and rocks in it. Now, this can down aircraft and satellite when it passes. It can affect the electrical grid. Now, of course, NASA, JPL, and the other disinformation sources ignore this data. But here are the facts. The Earth has a nickel and iron core. Now, this generates its magnetic field. However, the magnetosphere has large holes in it. The magnetosphere is a static shield. Now, under routine solar conditions, it protects the Earth from coronal mass ejections. But when Planet X arrives, we're no longer under routine solar conditions. Now, you know that the magnetic poles have been shifting towards Russia at maybe 40 miles an hour a year. But when Planet X arrives, the physical poles will shift. Now, this will create some hyper-earthquakes, tsunamis, and the shifting of land masses. So if you want to look at a few different states, one thing people can do to protect themselves is simply be in the right location when it happens. Now, there's a few states to avoid. And California is highly dangerous. It's composed of rock plates. Now, when rock is compressed, it breaks. And you'll see the crumbling of rock, of course, as its mass goes upwards. Now, the West Coast will have major catastrophic changes, synergistic proportions, tidal waves, high hurricane-force winds, earthquakes on the fault lines, volcanic activity over the magma. So it's highly dangerous. And I think the long-term danger is in riding out the shifts for those who are living near the boundaries of plates. Now, cities without mountains as a backdrop can just be washed out to sea. You'll have broken gas and water lines. San Francisco, it's on the San Andreas and other fault lines. A lot of the population will be trapped. Water will overflow. The city's survival will be minimal. California is not a good bet. Now, the area around Arizona, on the other hand, the Hoover Dam probably won't survive because of earthquake activity. And you'll have rivers flooding, and areas within rivers should probably be avoided. But you look at Phoenix and some of these main cities. Arizona has withstood many a pole shift. The area around Tucson is safe. Florida is another very dangerous state. Its highest elevation is 105 meters in the Panhandle. And but as for Central and South Florida and the Keys, these parts can be devastated by a tide of water. Colorado, for example, is a safe area. The domestic division of the CIA is relocating to Colorado. That should give viewers many clues right there. And of course, one of the safest parts of the country is the Ozarks, northern Arkansas, southern Missouri, average elevation close to 1,000 feet, self-sufficient water supply, agricultural land. They'll do well. They're also isolated from large metropolitan areas, and they're well enough inland to avoid flooding through, tidal waves. So it's part of the preparation is probably geographic, but I would expect when it hits, when you see this object in the sky, you'll have 1 to 2 days to accumulate all of the emergency food and water you can. I would accumulate at least a 3-month supply. I would highly recommend people educate themselves, understand the whole picture, and probably take action at that point.
Wise men said, just walk this way to the dawn of the light. Wind will blow into your face as the years